Hey people. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about raw foods because it's a passion of mine and I like talking about it. And I was just thinking, why is it that it's hard? Why is it hard to switch to a raw food diet? And the answer is it's a multi-layered answer, but it comes down to addiction and it also comes down to desire. And so the further question comes up, why do we desire a steak? Why do we desire bread, pasta, potatoes, blah, blah, blah? Sorry if I'm triggering anyone. But why is it? Why is it that we have those desires? And an excellent book on this subject, which I highly recommend, is called The Pleasure Trap. And it talks about the reasons why we evolved to crave these things. And it's because our bodies need sugar. Our bodies need fat. Our bodies need protein. And despite the fact that we evolved to get these things from fruit and perhaps some greens, there are other foods where these particular substances are highly concentrated. And so our body gets tricked. It's like, oh, some protein, and it satisfies that urge. Yet we spent 10 million years evolving to be getting that from fruit because there was no bread. There was no potatoes before there was cooked food because you couldn't eat a potato. And even when there was cooking, it wasn't so easy. You didn't just have a stove and you could just pop up the thing and have a faucet right there to start to boil them, to get the water to boil them. And even if there was a small amount of animal eating in the past, it wasn't so easy. It wasn't just going to the butcher. It at times took days. And our original ancestors evolved in tropical Africa, where there was abundant fruit, and it wasn't so easy to capture animals. And when you have that much fruit, it's also not necessary to look for other food because it's so good and it satisfies everything we need. And it wasn't until we left Africa that we started to the climate became colder and we needed to find other foods, and we needed to rely on cooking and those sorts of things. So basically our bodies evolved for 10 million years eating fruit, and we desired those things because we wanted to crave a little fat because our bodies needed it. And so we had to look for some of those fruits that were a little more fatty, like durian or soursop, because we would crave them because we needed it, and that's how it worked. And now, because we moved away without evolving to process those foods, we're in a bit of a pleasure trap. We get tricked. It feels like we want those foods. It feels like we need them. And when we eat them, we feel sated. But just like any other addiction, there's a downside. But also just like any other addiction, there's a way out. And there's a way to get out of those addictions. And that's basically what I found the best way for me, because everyone's got their thing that they get addicted to. Some people, it's alcohol. For me, it's easy to not do alcohol because it's not one of my things. But food, however, is. And it was very difficult for me to fully evolve into a raw food lifestyle because I would often have a little bit of cooked foods here and there. Or, it's hard for me because I live with my wife and daughter who are not raw. And I would make my daughter dinner, and of course I would always have a little bit, have a taste, blah, blah, blah. And that would sort of trigger me into eating much more. But what I found is when you completely eliminate something from your diet, it's hard, very hard at first, but after a while it gets easier and easier until the cravings are actually gone. And that's true of, I've gone off of many addictions in my life, and that's always been the case, that when you really stop doing something, you get out of the habit of it, it becomes easier and easier. So there are these foods that cause us to get addicted. They have concentrated these things, such as fat. I mean, when you have an oil, you've taken a whole food, like an avocado, and you've removed and extracted only the fat and made it into an oil. It's just pure fat. And that just drives us crazy. Our bodies are like, oh, fat. We need fat, and this is fat. Give me that stuff. But because our bodies evolved without this stuff in our presence, it didn't evolve ways to deal with pure fat. And so, when I first went vegan, I wasn't sure that we didn't need meat. I didn't know that we didn't need meat. And I was like, well, is it really true? Because actually at first when I went vegan, I didn't feel so good. And I believe that's because my body was adjusting to it, because that lasted about a year, and it's been 12 years and I feel amazing. But I was wondering at that time, do we really need meat? Maybe we do. Maybe that's why I crave it. Maybe that's why. And so I thought about it, and I'm actually a scientist, a former biology major, and I love science. Science is my passion, and I would look to science to see, and the evidence is overwhelming that meat causes many of our diseases. Dairy causes many of our Western first world diseases. It causes our number one killer. And yet there's been huge, very well-designed studies that show that a plant-based diet not only prevents our number one killer of heart disease, it can literally reverse it. And so it also does this with diabetes, another major killer. It does it with obesity. It's been shown that the standard American diet causes these things, and yet a plant-based diet will reverse them. It's certain types of cancer been clearly shown, and there's now a study going on by Dr. Dean Ornish, which he is saying he's optimistic is going to show that even Alzheimer's is going to be not only preventable but perhaps reversible, which is mind-blowing. And so my seeing these things made me believe that no, we didn't evolve to eat these things, especially not in the enormous quantities that we do. But it does seem quite obvious that plant-based diets are what we evolved to eat. But even those, perhaps, and there just hasn't been science has not been yet performed on, but I believe that raw fruit-based diet is actually what we evolved, and is actually going to be the healthiest, and is actually going to be giving us the longest and healthiest lifespan. And I also am getting into intermittent fasting, and I also believe that, when we lived in the jungle, we probably spent our time once a day climbing trees or whatever we had to do, eating one big meal, and that was it. And I also feel better on a one meal a day plan, but that also takes time to evolve to and to get in the habit of. So those have been my thoughts for today.